Atmospheric carbon has increased from just under 300 parts per million in 1880 to 420 parts per million in 2024. As carbon increases, heat is trapped in the atmosphere, resulting in higher temperatures. There are two solutions. First, stop taking carbon out of the ground, where 99% of carbon on Earth is stored. Second, move carbon from the atmosphere back into the ground. While these solutions are straightforward, the impact that everyday activities have on the carbon cycle are not always as clear. In this video, I'll focus on the carbon cycle of a typical home. I'll follow one carbon atom as it changes forms to better understand the impact our decision has on the carbon cycle. Along the way, I'll highlight opportunities to implement carbon landscaping solutions. Let's get started in the atmosphere with a carbon dioxide molecule. Carbon dioxide contains one carbon atom joined with two oxygen atoms. The first move is from the atmosphere to a plant. Once this happens, there are six potential outcomes for the carbon. The first outcome is the carbon dioxide avoids photosynthesis due to nightfall. Photosynthesis can only happen during the day using the sun's energy. Therefore, at night, when the process stops, plants release carbon dioxide back into the atmosphere. The remaining four outcomes occur after photosynthesis occurs and the sun's energy is converted into chemical energy. This process uses 6 carbon dioxide molecules plus 12 water molecules plus photons from the sun to produce glucose and oxygen. In glucose, there are 6 carbon and 6 oxygen atoms joined to 12 hydrogen atoms. A third option is for the plant to use carbon to grow. One example in trees is converting glucose into cellulose. You can see they have the same 3 core atoms, but there's a different number of hydrogen and oxygen atoms. Storing carbon in its fibers is one of the ways that trees take carbon out of the atmosphere. One mature tree can store over 48 pounds of carbon annually. Therefore, the first opportunity for homeowners is to plant more trees at home to take carbon out of the atmosphere. Next, our fourth outcome is the plant is consumed by an animal. So the carbon moves from the plant to the animal, leading to 5 new potential outcomes for carbon. The first outcome releases the carbon back into the atmosphere through respiration, since all mammals breathe in oxygen and breathe out carbon dioxide. A second outcome is the carbon is passed along as animal waste. The type and amount of carbon in the waste depends on the animal. Some waste contains up to 50% of the energy from the source. The remains will go into the atmosphere or move to the organism doing the consuming. A third outcome is the carbon becomes part of the animal. In this event, the carbon atom bonds with other complex molecules like proteins and carbs. A fourth outcome involves the end of our animal friend. In this scenario, all parts of the animal are consumed by living organisms. During decomposition, some of the carbon is released into the atmosphere, and the remaining carbon moves to the new animal or to the soil, depending on the organisms doing the consuming. The fifth and final outcome is where a tiny percent will become a fossil. I'll cover plants and animal fossils at the end. Next is the fifth scenario, where part of a tree is removed. Considering trees are 50% carbon, this is a good scenario to cover. I'll use a tree branch as an example, which has 3 potential outcomes for the carbon. The first outcome is the branch is burned, so the carbon is released into the atmosphere in the form of carbon dioxide. The second outcome is the branch is discarded in the trash, where it's taken to a dump and buried. Burying organic material creates anaerobic conditions for methane-producing bacteria to decompose the waste, converting the carbon in our cellulose to methane gas. Methane gas is a combination of carbon and hydrogen that is 28 times more harmful than carbon dioxide over a 100-year period because it traps more heat in the atmosphere. Therefore, the second opportunity for homeowners is to recycle organic matter at home by composting instead of sending organic material to landfills. Not only will this reduce methane gas emissions, but compost will build healthy soil at home, which is a key to sequestering carbon. The third outcome is for the plant material to become a fossil. I'll cover plant and animal fossils at the end. Next is the sixth and final outcome for carbon, which is to be expelled into the soil through root exudates. Approximately 40% of root exudates are sugar, so our carbon is now in the form of glucose. The first outcome is organisms in the soil consume the sugar and in turn provide nutrients to the plant. In this process, organisms release carbon dioxide through respiration. The second outcome is for the carbon to be stored as soil organic matter, where the carbon will remain until disturbed. The third outcome involves disturbing the soil, causing our stored carbon to be released into the atmosphere as carbon dioxide. This happens with practices like tilling vegetable gardens and lawn care practices like dethatching and core aeration. This leads to my third opportunity for homeowners, which is to use land management practices that limit soil disturbances. While on the subject of soil, the fourth opportunity for homeowners is to go beyond minimizing soil disturbances and to proactively build healthy soil. The living organisms in the soil play a valuable role in sequestering carbon, and traditional landscaping practices rely on herbicides and pesticides that harm these organisms. The best way to improve soil health is to apply a high-quality compost to feed the organisms in the soil. At this point, I've covered the 6 scenarios for carbon, so I'm going to circle back to cover fossils, which are a very important part of the carbon cycle. To make a fossil, the plant or animal must be quickly buried in sediment that then turns to hard rock to protect the structure. This is considered a rare scenario, with only a tiny percentage of organisms becoming a fossil, with an even smaller percentage turning to a fossil fuel. Once a fossil, carbon has 2 potential outcomes. The first is the fossil remains in the ground, where over 99% of the Earth's carbon is currently stored. One fossil fuel example is coal, which is mined in Pennsylvania. This coal is known as anthracite coal, which is considered the highest grade of coal because of its high carbon content. It contains between 86 and 97% carbon, and also contains hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen, and sulfur. The second outcome is for the coal to be removed from the ground and combusted for energy. Once combusted, then the primary output is carbon dioxide along with other toxic emissions. An opportunity for homeowners is reducing the use of fossil fuels like oil, which is used in gas-powered lawn equipment. In 2011, gas-powered lawn equipment was responsible for releasing over 20 million tons of carbon dioxide. 2 opportunities for homeowners to impact these emissions is to reduce the size of turf lawns and to replace gas equipment with reel mowers or electric equipment powered by the sun. Now that you have a better understanding of the carbon cycle, I'm going to put it all together. We started with the root cause, which is that carbon is being moved from the ground to the atmosphere where it traps heat and causes temperatures to increase. We also started with 2 goals: to stop taking carbon from the ground and to focus on activities that move carbon from the atmosphere to the ground. I'm going to add 2 key learnings. First is that carbon is part of all living things. Therefore, all living things impact the carbon cycle, whether they want to or not. Second, this is a cycle. There is no starting or end point for carbon. The carbon atom is continually recycled in different forms. Lastly, our 6 opportunities which I listed here, and I added the appropriate strategy to highlight that our 6 strategies are achieving our goals. I'll close by sharing lyrics from the song Get Off This by Cracker. Get off this, get on with it. If you want to change the world, shut your mouth and start this minute.